We are live with the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Brandon Kravitz here, along with a very special guest on this Tuesday. We'll get to him in a moment. 10-game slate last night. We'll see if we can pluck out some storylines from all of that, as well as more fallout from the earth-shattering trade that we saw over the weekend. Luka headed to the LA Lakers. AD coming on back to Dallas. Could not be a better time to bring a Laker fan onto the show. So without any further ado, a man who I consider a mentor of mine, even though he's not old, the commissioner of my big money fantasy basketball league that you guys hear me talk about, and a current instructor at the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting. This man truly does it all. Mike Tuck, ladies and gentlemen, a full Orlando takeover here on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I must have done something right because that was an outstanding introduction.
Well, you certainly have. I credit at least a portion of whatever success I have been able to obtain in this wild world of sports media to listening to you, following you from when I first started listening to sports talk radio in Orlando, Florida, and then all of the invaluable advice that you've given me along the way. So to bring you onto this podcast, and the fact that you're a hoop head like me and like everybody else that's listening to this, absolutely perfect. I'm excited.
And the fact we're actually playing each other this week in our head-to-head matchup.
I mean, it really could not have worked out any better. When I went to go see just the makeup of your roster. It's like any fantasy league that you're in. You know who your players are. I couldn't tell you who a single other person in our league has, because I'm not paying attention to it unless I'm playing against them. Well, yesterday was Monday. You know, it's you're still trying to get over the wild nature of the weekend and kind of get your footing. And so this morning was actually the first time I looked at who my matchup was for the week. I had my roster, my lineup set yesterday. And of course it's the man that I'm bringing onto the podcast. Now you've got yourself a nice, strong record. I'm curious to see, we'll get to this in a moment. A bit of backstory on you for those that are hearing your voice for the first time. I know who you are, but I don't want to gloss over the fact that you're new to a lot of people that are listening and watching this right now. How did you get your start in broadcasting, Mike? Give us a little backstory and what led you to where you are right now, where you are not only inspiring me, but inspiring the young minds of the sportscasting world.
Well, I think like a lot of youngsters that go through life early on, is your love for sports dials up to about 1,000. You want to play as long as you can play. And then at some point in high school, I realized genetically, I was not going to be inclined to go play pro basketball or pro football, my two loves in life. And so for me, it was just wanting to do something in broadcasting, any way, any shape, any form. I went to school at UCF here in Orlando. I grew up in South Florida. I went to school at UCF. And then when I finished, before I finished, actually I had an internship in radio. And that was the bridge that got me to start in radio. And here we are all these years later, a couple of different radio stations back working with you guys still here in Orlando. So it's been an incredible journey. I ended up at the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting now 6 years ago, come March 1st, and getting to pass along, as you described it, like that mentor kind of role to all those that want to follow my footsteps and pass along all I can to help them do so, whether it's television, radio, or otherwise, has been a great treat. Honestly, it's one of the great thrills in life. And you know this as a father now too, is to get to pass along what you know and to get to see growth and maturity out of people. It's the greatest reward you can have in life. And I get to have it every month with different students at Full Sail.
Yeah, I love imprinting my stupidity on my kid. It's one of the great joys that I have.
Don't make my mistakes, kids. Don't make my mistakes.
Exactly. Learn from my screw ups, young one. When did you start playing fantasy basketball? Because this league that I am now in, this is year one for me in this league. It's not the first year I've played fantasy basketball, but it is the first year I've played with you guys, and this already feels like a highly competitive league that's been together for a little while. I don't know if this was the beginning for you or what. What's the backstory on that?
Yeah, this league was my first league. It was the original league, and like a lot of people, I think with fantasy basketball, it starts probably with fantasy football, fantasy baseball, and then I got roped into fantasy basketball. You like basketball? Come and join us. I want to say it was 2005. I remember my first year. Correct me if I'm wrong, it's maybe a year off, but my first year, I think, was LeBron's second year in the NBA.
He was drafted in 3, so that
Right. It wasn't his rookie year, it was his second year. And I had the second pick in that draft, and KG went 1. And we're like, all right, I think LeBron James has got to be the choice of number 2. We saw enough in his rookie year, and it took off from there.
yeah. Well, I made a similar move so 20 years later, I have now entered this league, and I had the number 2 pick and did the exact same thing with the next generational number 1 overall talent in Victor Wembanyama. And let me tell you, it's paying off. Now my team could use a little bit of work. I think I still need to figure out just getting the categories right. Because it is one of the more challenging parts of playing fantasy basketball, as people that light us up in the comment section can attest to. But in terms of overall talent, I like my roster, and it starts with a guy like Victor Wembanyama, who does seem like he has taken that leap, and I think he'll be number 1 or number 2 in fantasy basketball drafts for years to come.
Yeah, for the foreseeable future. Dude, it's just so good. I remember talking to you before the season started, and you weren't sure if you should make the leap. I had him last year. I had him in his rookie season, in what was my 3rd straight championship. It's looking a lot tougher this year, for the record. I don't know that the 4-peat's going to happen for me, but to get Wemby, I think I got him in the beginning of the 4th round or into the 3rd, one or the other, and it was obviously like with what he brings to the table, and it's only going to get better. This is going to get better. The assists are going to get better. The efficiency is going to get better. He's one of one, no doubt.
Yeah, especially with De'Aaron Fox added to the mix now. It seems like the consistency, I think, has been the biggest problem for Wemby and the Spurs in general. Sometimes they're out there, they look like world beaters. I find the Spurs, because I bet a lot of basketball, the Spurs are one of the toughest bets, because when they look right, they're such a fun team to be on. And when Wemby, especially in those spotlight games, like that first game in Paris or the Christmas game against the Knicks, where he rises to the level of the stage that he is on, and sometimes his teammates are able to meet him there, but that's not always the case. You added De'Aaron Fox to the mix, and I think it should help to level out some of the consistency that we see. You remember who the debate was at number 2? I'm sure that you do. We know who the best players in the league are. Jokic went 1. That's probably who I would have taken had he been available, but I was between Wemby and Luka Doncic, and we'll save the Luka chat for the end of the podcast here, but I'm glad that I made the decision that I did, just based on availability. Luka hasn't been playing.
It's the one thing that it haunts us all that play fantasy sports, is the injury that could happen to any of the 1st round picks. They're all surefire bets until they get hurt. And then, did you make the right choice or the wrong choice?
Ironically, you put Anthony Davis on the block. That's the guy that, looking at your roster, I would assume you would say that's the player that's been carrying you this season. You put him on the block about 2 to 3 days ago. I'd made you an offer. You swatted at it very quickly, so thank you for that. But I don't know. Did you know he was going to get traded? Did you have some intel? You put AD on the block right before he gets moved?
Yeah, that is funny, actually, in retrospect. I had no idea. Obviously, this is one of those you never would consider trading, right? Like you play fantasy sports, and like when we see a trade, it's very easy. Like in dynasty leagues, and I think you do dynasty football. If I remember hearing you correctly, I do as well. And it's where I had a guy come to me. I'll give you an example. Like last year, year before, actually for a couple of years in a row, I drafted Jamar Chase's rookie year in the dynasty league, and he has Justin Jefferson. And so he's hit me up, it feels like every year, to ask me about, hey, what will it take to get Jamar Chase? And it's just one of those like non-starters. It's like, I'm not moving Jamar Chase. There's no advantage for me moving Jamar Chase. And then it's like, well, unless you're going to give me Justin Jefferson, then maybe we can have and it's like, no, I don't want to do that. Well, I said, I feel the same way. It's like, it's a non-starter in the conversation. And I heard you on the radio yesterday going through kind of the non-starters, like for trade. Yeah.
Right.
Like, no, we're not even having a conversation. Right. And Anthony Davis is kind of that guy. It's like, well, if the Lakers are trying to win a title with LeBron, like you're not going to move Anthony Davis. That doesn't make any sense. So not in a million years would you have thought Anthony Davis would be traded. They've done everything to show that he's the future of the organization in Los Angeles. And so, yeah, I know the focus has been on Luka, and rightfully so, of like, why would Dallas trade him? It was sort of the same perspective from the Lakers. It's like, hold on, wait, why would they do that? Because AD will probably be grossly underappreciated for his career. I was thinking about this yesterday because of all the players I've seen in my lifetime, and I'm sure there are others that would be on this list behind him closely, but he's going to finish his career without a Defensive Player of the Year award. Like Wemby's got that thing sewn up, like unless he gets hurt, I guess, and then he won't be eligible. Not jinxing you and Wemby on your roster.
Thanks for that.
but there's no way, as good as he's been defensively in his career, that he should not have finished with the Defensive Player of the Year. Like Rudy Gobert with 4 doesn't make any sense when AD gets none. Like sometimes you look retrospectively and go, how did we arrive at that conclusion?
It's just all counting stats. That's
right.
That's the only thing it's not impact on the game. I think we do that with MVP. We've learned to get more analytical, but I swear with Defensive Player of the Year, it's how many blocks do you have?
Right. Yeah. And that's what's hurt guards, right? And wings in the past. And then Marcus Smart, of all people, gets it. First guy since Gary Payton to get it. And it's like, wait a second, like there are other perimeter defenders, and I'm not knocking Marcus Smart. He had a good year, but like there are other guys that you would have thought would have gotten a Defensive Player of the Year award on the perimeter before Marcus Smart. So yeah, sometimes these things are funny, but I would say like no way. Like I didn't think any way Anthony Davis was going to get traded.
No, well, I don't think any of us saw this coming. Did you agree, by the way, with the list? I put out a list of that. If you had asked me this 3-4 days ago, my list of untouchables in the NBA probably would have run about 12 to 15 deep. After Luka gets traded, he detonates the list, and my list is now down to 4. If Luka can get traded, then pretty much anybody can. Jokic, Tatum, SGA, and Wemby were my only complete, I will hang up the phone on you, don't even bother, like Jamar Chase in fantasy.
Right.
In Dynasty.
I would say, first of all, this is being semantical, but Wemby's the only untradeable asset. Like, there's no call the Spurs to receive. Like, versus SGA, like, if the Spurs called and they said, yeah, we're thinking of moving off of Wemby. We think he's too skinny. Right. Then, like, Oklahoma City, they're like, wait, are we getting, like the same way everyone thought with Luka? Like, are we getting pranked here? Like, is this real? So, it's semantical, but like number one is the guy that's untouchable. I would disagree with Jason Tatum, though. I think, and it's funny because I feel like I went on the defense for him all last year during the playoffs and the finals.
Same. You and I were on the same page with that. He is criminally underrated for how great he is.
Right. And it's like, well, Jaylen Brown got the award. Well, I don't agree with why Jaylen Brown got the award, first of all, for finals MVP when Jason Tatum was their best player. So in that, I guess I'm making an argument against what I've argued in the past. I think that makes it so he is tradable. I guess it's a short list, right? There's a handful of guys you would consider doing, or maybe a combination if someone wanted to get crazy and do it. But that would be the one I'd probably pick at a little bit. And obviously the whole argument as a whole is like Luka would have been, right? What'd you say? Like 2 or 3 on that list, right? So
yeah,
here Luka got traded, so it's kind of crazy.
Well, when you think about why Luka got traded, part of it, if you believe the reports that are out there, and it's not so far-fetched, we know that Luka isn't LeBron when it comes to athleticism and dumping $1 million into your body every year. For him to not be as conditioned as the team would like or take his fitness as seriously as they would hope, they felt like it was leading to injuries. They felt like it could lead to future injuries that they didn't want to be a part of. That is now baked into my list and why I would have somebody like Jason Tatum. He's already proved that he can win a championship. That's huge because he got there and he did it. And he's somebody that you don't have to worry about when it comes to work ethic. How well is a guy like that going to age? I would say pretty well. So why would Boston ever take a call on him unless it's for one of the other guys on the list, but they're untouchable, so those teams aren't calling.
Right. I guess I would say, though, just to further the conversation, like it wouldn't happen, right? But if the Magic called and said, hey, we feel like we're closer if we make this move, we'll give you Paolo for Jason Tatum. Like if you're the Celtics, you'd have to really, really think about the age discrepancy there. And I know Paolo struggled for the last couple of weeks, but
it's a bad time to bring that up.
I know, but like big picture here, like after like the under 25 list, Paolo is either second or third on that puppy. Like you'd have to really consider it with the age gap, the same way the Lakers did. Like I don't think this trade makes the Lakers better now.
It doesn't.
But big picture, like yeah, how could you say no for that extra 6 years of lifespan you would grow?
Jason Tatum's 26 years old. Let's not act like this guy's in his mid-30s.
I was barely drinking.
Okay. All right. We're gonna get back into this trade because there's some other questions I want to tee up to you about this, and from the fan perspective, because you and I haven't had a chance to talk about this. Mike Tuck is a Lakers fan, and what this looks like moving forward is fascinating. But 10-game slate last night in the association. Amen Thompson continues to pour it on. He had a 25-point triple double last night. In the last 2 weeks, he has been the number 9 player in fantasy basketball. He might be the most fun player to roster right now with the way that he's been playing. I love watching him.
Yeah, he does a little bit of everything. And it's funny, the word untouchable came up recently because Houston's one of those teams where even for De'Aaron Fox, I think it was in the conversation a week ago when the Fox news came out, is like Houston was probably there with the Magic and the Spurs as like maybe the 3 teams that you would consider favorites to trade for him. And like, it's like, oh yeah, we'd love to get Amen Thompson. The same way you'd like to get Stephen Castle back from the Spurs. And it's like, it's like, that's not the guy. Like, let's not start there. That dude he's really good. And those are tricky. Like, as a college basketball fan, him and his brother going and playing in G League Unite, like, or whatever, like, it's like, I don't get to see him. So last year was like, all right, what's it going to look like? But now, because of Jabari Smith getting hurt, it's really opened up the opportunity for him to play more minutes. And he's paid huge dividends for anyone who had him.
So you mentioned Paolo. How concerned should we be with what we've seen from Paolo Banchero? I feel like I'm too close to the fire to even answer this. I feel hurt personally. I have to do the post-game shows. I was up at 1:00 in the morning on the East Coast breaking this one down. Let me tell you, folks, not a lot of fun. The percentages are awful. Another 0 for 6 performance from deep, and he has completely stopped getting to the line. And when he gets to the line, he's not making them. He has shot less than 33% or less in 4 straight games from the free throw line on minimal attempts. This just isn't his game. And it's the 3 ball. Okay, you know that's going to be hit or miss with him. But the fact that he can't even get to the bucket and draw contact is the most concerning part of what I'm seeing. How do you see it with Paolo?
Yeah, I would say, and maybe that's part of the reason why too, is you don't want to get to the foul line because you're not shooting it particularly well. So maybe it's a sports psychologist thing. You hate going there with it, but maybe that's a little bit of what it is. I know his 1 year at Duke, that was a struggle too, right? It was one of the reasons that wasn't necessarily a no-brainer, is didn't shoot the 3 particularly well compared to the other 2 guys atop the board. And his free throw shooting, although he got there a lot, wasn't great either. And that kind of was squashed pretty quickly in his career, but it's come back around a little bit. And we've seen that happen with other guys, whether it's like a Tim Duncan, a LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, guys that get there a lot, that go from being 80% to suddenly in the 60s. And you're like, what's going on there? So I think it's a little sports psychology. I do feel like, I know talking about the De'Aaron Fox deal last week with the Magic potentially, where I didn't love the KCP signing. It wasn't a knock against KCP. I think he does what he does. It was that I would have loved to have seen Jalen Suggs off the ball a little bit more, and maybe even Suggs' absence is playing into this with Paolo some. I want him to be given easier opportunities. I don't want him to have to force so much on his own. And so I think if you get a good point guard in place, it's going to set you up for a lot of those easier buckets, cuts to the rim where you're not having to go through dribble, turn, spin, shoot, do everything yourself. So I think some of that's at play with Paolo as well.
And we really don't even know what that looks like because he's never played with a guy like that in the NBA, and college is such a different game. You can get away with that in college. And Paolo, when he's on, he can play that point forward role. And you kind of feel like when he's at his best, man, maybe you don't need a traditional point guard. But right now, it definitely feels like that would help. It's a good analysis by you, and I think you're spot on when it comes to the sports psychology aspect. And it's hard to break down for fantasy purposes how you exactly address that or how that's applicable. If you got a trade offer right now, I'm so bad with lining up what player would be the right because every league is so different in terms of what you value. Would you be looking to shop Paolo? Would you be quick to hit the button if somebody offered you a decent trade for him? Or do you feel like right now, if you got a Paolo offer, you'd probably be getting fleeced because you're selling so low?
Yeah, it's timing's everything, right? Like if you would have sold him right before the injury, you would have banked, right? You would have probably gotten players 2 rounds higher because he was off to such a great start this season and then gets hurt. So obviously value dips. Came back. If you sell him maybe after the first game after he gets back or a couple of games, then maybe you have value. I'm not a big fan of selling low ever. Like you're just, especially if the asset's good, if you believe in the asset, then there's no sense in selling low. If you don't, then sometimes you're actually selling at the highest possible point before it depreciates completely. But with Paolo, I would just hang tough. You knew if you drafted him that the steals and the blocks weren't going to necessarily be there. And, that's not going to change a whole lot. The percentages, though, will swing. The scoring will go up inevitably. The rebounding will as well. So I would hang on to him at least until he starts turning the corner. I always think 2-3 games in a row. If you can stretch it to 5, even better. But I would hang on to Paolo right now. Don't sell low.
Well, one other takeaway from last night, other than the fact that Trey Murphy was awesome, he scored 41 with Zion in the lineup. Probably best if that team does move on from Brandon Ingram, which they probably will. But Domantas Sabonis had a bad night, and it was the first game without De'Aaron Fox as a member of the Kings. I wonder how much panic this is going to cause, because he's already player around 28 in fantasy this year. I think it's been a bit of a down year in terms of the overall counting stats for Sabonis, but would you consider him a sell candidate in your mind? I think I'd have a hard time not wanting to move off of him, but might not be timing wise. It might not be best, right? Even though usage could be on the rise.
I think in all these conversations, it matters what you get back in return. He's going to help. Obviously, he's the leading rebounder in the NBA. He chips in assists at an unseen level, except for Jokic at the center spot. It's just a matter of, you're not going to get, again, steals and blocks, at least too many out of them. I do think it's an interesting experiment for Sacramento, though, without a true point guard lined up for them now. It's going to be LaVine handling the ball starting tomorrow. It's going to be DeRozan handling the ball as long as those guys are there. It's going to be Sabo handling the ball. So his role is going to fluctuate a little bit. Malik Monk's not a true point guard. He's a terrific player, terrific scorer, but how they do it collectively could hurt the shot quality all of them get.
I have Monk on my roster up against you this week, and I'm hoping that those numbers go up with De'Aaron Fox out the door. Let's take a quick breather so I can tell you about Edge Boost. Edge Boost is the financial platform for smart bettors and DFS players everywhere. What are the benefits of a dedicated Edge Boost betting account? How about 0.5% on every deposit, free to use, no minimum balances, FDIC insured accounts, unlimited withdrawals, and deposits and withdrawals are lightning quick. You can sign up today with the promo code ROTOPOD and go and check them out. It's Edge Boost. So the trade deadline is a couple of days away. I have a feeling now, and I don't think I would have felt this way a couple of days ago, that it's going to be absolute madness. Teams are probably picking up the phone and making calls, just feeling motivated by the seismic nature of that Luka deal. Well, let's talk about that trade. Luka dealt in the middle of the night for AD, Max Christie, and a first-round pick in 4 years. It's still hard for me to wrap my head around this trade. Right now, I actually like the Mavericks roster a little bit better because I always felt like Kyrie and Luka were a little redundant. And the fact that they made it to the finals last year was nothing short of a miracle, and OKC just not being quite ripened and ready. So I like the Mavericks in the immediate future. The Lakers, it feels like a future move. But your thoughts on what this does for both teams and your initial reaction when you found out the news? Because this is one of those you remember where you were kind of moments as an NBA fan.
I was in bed. I fell asleep. I went to bed at 11:30.
Did you see it when it happened, or was this a morning thing for you?
Yeah, morning. I woke up at 11:30, and our mutual friend Brian Fritz had texted me, but I didn't see his text first. I just saw the first thing was blockbuster NBA trade breaking news. So I went there before I saw his message was, we're going to need to talk when you see the news, which was sent like 1 a.m. or something. I didn't get, obviously, because I was sound asleep. No, it was stunning. I would just echo exactly what everyone else has said. Absolutely stunning. Look, the other funny aspect to this is if there is a front office that has been made fun of for their inability to keep any secrets, it's the LA Lakers. And they pulled over the greatest surprise trade in NBA history. Rob Pelinka, yeah, that's where you absolutely 100% believe LeBron, and people don't want to when he said he didn't know. If he knew,
I believe him. I don't think he knew.
If he knew, then we would have known. It would have leaked out through his channels, right? Like somehow that would have gotten out there. it's stunning. My question for Dallas would be this, and I know some people like it, and I could see how Anthony Davis helps them just because he's a great player. When Kyrie goes to the bench or gets hurt, who's running the offense? Spencer Dinwiddie? I mean, seriously, who's handling the ball? Like, the difference between Luka and AD is Luka's a sun. Planets and everything revolves around the sun. AD is more of like a planet where like you can funnel stuff through him, but he's not the center of the universe. He's not center of the galaxy. So you can run your offense through AD, but there's still got to be people, shot clocks running down. Who's going to get the shot up? And that's what I wonder with Dallas is now that is all on Kyrie. And I don't think that's necessarily a great idea.
Yeah, and I don't think you make moves necessarily for what happens when this player goes to the bench, because in the playoffs that just happens more infrequently. Now, injury obviously would derail them entirely, and when you have Kyrie and Luka on the team, you can get by without one out there.
Right.
They probably should have addressed this when they let Jalen Brunson walk out the door, but now we are several years removed from that issue because he helped to keep that offense nice and steady. And I don't think Dante Exum is necessarily going to get you where you need to be. Perhaps they make another move. I think based on the way that Jason Kidd probably wants to run this team in terms of tempo, a defensive mentality, in that way it helps with what Dallas wants to do right now. And if Kyrie was dialed in last year, that's part of the reason that this worked. And why they made it to the NBA Finals. You get a dialed-in Kyrie who now takes ownership of I'm the face of the franchise with a defensive player of the year type of player in Anthony Davis that can take over basketball games. One of the first bets I made when this trade went down was for Dallas to make it out of the Western Conference. They were 16-1 to make it out of the West. I feel like it's kind of up in the air. If OKC's not ready when we get to playoff time, they're going to have a hard time matching up with AD, especially if Chet isn't quite right. So I don't like this long term because Luka is a top 3 player on the planet, and you had him for another 10 years, perhaps. But in terms of right now, in this very moment, I actually think this helps Dallas.
Okay. I just look at that roster being constructed in a way that it let players like Derek Jones isn't there anymore. PJ Washington, even Najee Marshall and other guys that they brought in are more role players, catch and shoot on offense. And that's all they do. They just kind of stand to the side. They occasionally cut to the basket. And now it's not just putting more on Kyrie's plate, but it's putting more on others' plates that I'm not sure they're ready to handle. And here's the other aspect. I know AD doesn't want to play center all the time. I get it. It's also the best spot for him. Tim Duncan didn't want to play center either, but unless David Robinson was lined up next to him, he was their best option at center, right? And AD is still their best option at center. It's one less shooter on the floor. How is that going to work? I see more problems with this. Everyone's talking about the Lakers needing to make another move. I think Dallas needs to make another move to get in another creator, another wing who actually can handle the ball and facilitate offense.
Well, now they have the ability to do it because they kind of have a glut of bigs. Daniel Gafford's been playing great. I know those that have been rostering him in fantasy have been over the moon with what he's been producing. They have Derek Lively, and you probably don't need all 3 of those guys in your rotation. But when you get a pair of them out there together, it's going to be a load to deal with. I think Dallas can be really good moving forward. And let's also keep in mind, Anthony Davis probably going to be pretty motivated. You talk about sports psychology. I think Anthony Davis is going to feel the most slighted out of anybody, and we could end up seeing some monster performances. When you look at this through a fantasy lens, who's the biggest winner that comes out of this statistically? This is where I'm having trouble because I view LeBron as an overall loser. I don't think his stats get any better. Loser might even be too far because he's LeBron, so he's just going to give you what LeBron does. Luka, I don't think Luka's stats improve because he plays next to LeBron James. They do so much of the same thing. Austin Reeves is also a creator that needs the ball in his hands. Well, you're playing with 2 of the best in the world, so your stats are probably going to get worse. AD could see a slight increase. I like him a little bit more. It was part of the reason why. Oh, we got the kid checking in. Yeah, I was hoping this would happen.
You say hi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Dylan,
This is Tyler. This is the
Tyler,
little
Tyler,
one.
do you want to? Did Tyler want to check in on the Anthony Davis trade?
Say hi.
What's up?
Hi.
See that? See this is the most adorable the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast has been yet to date.
We almost made it. We almost made it. No, to your point though, I would say there probably are more losers in this than winners. I guess Kyrie potentially could be a winner because you would think he'd get more opportunity to score. I think AD probably jumps up a tick. Daniel Gafford has to be a loser in all this because AD is going to steal away opportunity for him. Lively's already out. Obviously, that'll be a playoff thing because he won't be back till April. Potentially someone else like I would highlight maybe a Spencer Dinwiddie, as crazy as that sounds, could be a guy that you might want to pluck off waivers that potentially could give you something now because more could be on his plate. He was pretty good for the Lakers at the end of last season. Austin Reeves is absolutely a loser in all of this because once Luka's healthy, he's going to be the third guy in there. I guess whoever the Lakers get at center, I don't think it'll be Jackson Hayes because even this past week, just as an example against the Knicks, I think he had 2 points and 4 rebounds in that game. So don't go unloading your budget on Jackson Hayes. And I saw where some people did that.
Well, that is not something you want to do, but they should be active. There are bigs out there, serviceable bigs that they could go out and get. And we know the Lakers aren't going to be shy about making moves. Don't worry, Tyler. We're going to have you answer a question. It's time for our listener question of the day. The bounce is how we wrap our episode. Cole Anthony. I think what we've seen from Cole is sustainable right now, especially with Jalen Suggs out of the lineup, and Anthony Black he's hit a wall. So Cole will be able to score as he's been last couple of games, 26 and 23. So I would expect that to maintain at least for another week or so.
Yeah, it might be a guy too if you have him, and I know a guy in our league does have him, who's been trying to sell him to me. You can sell high too if you get somebody who thinks that Suggs won't be back, but just ride it until it goes off the tracks is what I would say with Cole Anthony.
This is a family affair. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Mike Tuck, thanks for spot up fill-in duty for Nick Whalen, who is out in New Orleans covering Super Bowl 59. And Tyler, thanks for checking in. Yeah, I know. He's living the life right now.
Thank you, man. It was fun.
Of course. That's going to do it for us on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. You can check back for more episodes, our variety of analysts, 4 episodes per week. We leave no stone unturned. Until then, hoopheads.